The fall of the Roman Empire remains one of the most significant events in history, marking the end of a grand civilization that shaped much of Western culture, politics, and society. To fully understand the magnitude of this decline, we must first appreciate the power and influence of the Roman Empire at its peak. Rome was not just a city, it was the heart of an empire that stretched across vast territories, from the sands of Egypt to the islands of Britain, from the mountains of Hispania to the deserts. In its early days, Rome was a republic, a system that allowed for significant political participation by its citizens. However, as it expanded, the challenges of governing such a large and diverse population led to a series of political upheavals, eventually giving way to imperial rule. The establishment of the Roman Empire by Augustus in 27 BCE marked the beginning of an era of unprecedented expansion, stability, and prosperity. This era, known as the Pax Romana, spanned approximately 200 years during. But how did such a powerful empire, one that had dominated the Mediterranean world for centuries, come to an end? Was it the result of a single catastrophic event, or a series of interconnected crises that slowly unraveled the fabric of Roman society? To answer this, we must explore the complex web of political, social, economic, and military factors that contributed to the decline. At the heart of the story of Rome's fall is a shift in the empire's internal dynamics. The political system, which once allowed for a balance of power, became increasingly unstable. Corruption, political infighting, and the weakening of central authority created an environment ripe for rebellion and division. While the empire was still capable of military victories, its ability to manage its vast territories weakened over time, and the pressures from external forces mounted. The Romans, once able to reap. In the coming sections, we will explore the key events and figures that contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. From the economic crises to the military defeats, from the role of Christianity to the internal decay of the Roman political system, the reasons for Rome's collapse are multifaceted and complex. But by understanding these factors, we gain insight into how even the most powerful civilizations can fall. The rise of the Roman Empire is a tale of ambition, military prowess, and strategic alliances. In its early days, Rome was a small city-state, initially governed by a republican system. The city grew from humble beginnings, overcoming challenges and conflicts with neighboring states to establish its dominance in the Mediterranean. Over time, Rome's political system evolved, and it began to absorb surrounding territories. This growth was marked by a series of significant military victories, where Roman legions, known for their discipline and organization, were able to defeat enemies and expand their borders. Rome's military successes allowed it to gain control of vast territories. The Punic Wars, fought between Rome and Carthage, were some of the most pivotal in Roman history. These wars culminated in the destruction of Carthage and solidified Rome's power in the western Mediterranean. However, Rome's expansion did not stop there. With the conquest of Greece, Egypt, and parts of the Middle East, Rome became a dominant force in the ancient world. During the Republic, Rome's expansion was driven by a combination of necessity and desire for wealth and power. The need for resources to sustain its growing population and army, as well as the ambition of its leaders, spurred the Roman state to conquer and control ever larger territories. This expansion brought Rome both riches and problems. As its borders stretched further, it became more difficult to defend them. The empire faced threats from external forces, but internal issues also began to emerge. Despite these challenges, the Roman military continued to expand, and under the leadership of figures like Julius Caesar, Rome's dominance was further cemented. Caesar's conquest of Gaul, for example, added vast new territories to the empire. His crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE was a turning point in Roman history, leading to the collapse of the Republic and the rise of imperial rule. Following Caesar's assassination, his adopted heir, Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome, marking the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus, previously known as Octavian, brought stability to the empire after years of civil war. His reign, which began in 27 BCE, is considered the start of the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and prosperity that lasted for over 2 centuries. Augustus was not only a military leader but also a skilled politician who knew how to navigate Rome's complex political landscape. He reformed the military, built infrastructure, and promoted cultural achievements that would shape Rome's legacy. By the time of Augustus's death, Rome had become a vast empire, its territories stretching from the British Isles to the Near East. This expansion laid the foundation for the challenges that the empire would face in the centuries to come. The Roman Empire's ability to absorb diverse cultures, govern large populations, and maintain military dominance was impressive. However, the very size and complexity of the empire would later prove to be one of its greatest weaknesses. As the Roman Empire expanded, its internal political system began to show signs of instability. The political structure that had worked well during the early years of the Republic was increasingly unable to cope with the pressures of governing such a vast empire. Political power became concentrated in the hands of a few elite families, and corruption began to seep into the very heart of the Roman state. Senators and generals vied for power, often through manipulation and violence rather than through fight. During the later stages of the Republic, Rome saw a series of political crises. The competition between powerful individuals like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus resulted in the formation of the First Triumvirate, an alliance between three of the most powerful men in Rome. This agreement, however, was not long-lasting, and political conflict erupted. Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE, which led to a civil war, marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. After Caesar's assassinatio, this political instability continued under Augustus, the first emperor. While Augustus managed to bring order to the empire, he did so by consolidating power in his own hands and gradually undermining the republican institutions. He made himself the unchallenged ruler of Rome, using his military power and political skill to maintain control. Augustus's reign brought peace and prosperity, but it also meant the end of any meaningful political competition. The imperial system that he established was based on. After Augustus's death, the emperors who succeeded him faced increasing challenges to their power. The succession of emperors was often determined by military force, as generals and soldiers would declare their loyalty to a new leader, sometimes overthrowing the sitting emperor in the process. The lack of a clear, stable system for succession led to frequent changes in leadership, and political instability continued to plague the empire throughout its history. The political instability of the Roman Empire reached a peak in the 3rd century CE, during the so-called crisis of the 3rd century. This was a period marked by constant civil wars, barbarian invasions, and economic collapse. During this time, the empire saw the rise and fall of more than 20 emperors, many of whom were either murdered or deposed. The central authority of the emperor weakened, and the empire was divided into multiple factions. In the West, the empire was continually attacked by Barbary. The political chaos in Rome itself was mirrored by a shift in the empire's governance. The emperor's power became less absolute, and regional commanders gained more influence. As military leaders and generals fought for control, the empire's ability to function cohesively began to erode. The lack of effective leadership created a volatile environment where the empire's political institutions were no longer strong enough to preserve its unity. In this climate of uncertainty, it became increasingly difficult for the Roman state to maintain control over its vast territories. Political instability not only weakened Rome internally but also made it vulnerable to external threats. The empire's inability to govern effectively contributed to its eventual decline, as factions fought for control and rival groups sought to weaken the empire from within. As the Roman Empire expanded, so did its economic challenges. In its early years, Rome had a strong economy based on agriculture, trade, and military conquest. However, as the empire grew larger, it became more difficult to maintain the economic system that had once supported its rapid expansion. Several factors contributed to the economic decline of the empire, including inflation, heavy taxation, reliance on slave labor, and the increasing burden of military expenses. One of the key economic problems Rome faced was inflation. The empire's currency, which had been based on silver and gold, began to lose its value. In an effort to fund its military campaigns and other expenses, emperors began debasing the currency by reducing the amount of precious metal in the coins. This led to inflation, as the value of money decreased, and prices for goods and services soared. As inflation worsened, the economy became more unstable, and the empire's ability to generate wealth was severely limited. Another significant issue was the Roman tax system. To maintain the vast empire and fund its military, Rome had to collect large amounts of tax revenue. However, the tax burden on the population became overwhelming. The wealthy elite often found ways to avoid paying taxes, while the lower classes were left to bear the brunt of the financial strain. As a result, the Roman economy became increasingly unequal, with a growing divide between the rich and poor. The high taxes also discouraged investment and innovation, stifling economy. The reliance on slave labor was another factor that contributed to Rome's economic decline. Slaves made up a significant portion of the workforce in the empire, particularly in agriculture and industry. However, as the empire's expansion slowed and new territories became harder to conquer, the supply of slaves diminished. This led to labor shortages, which in turn affected agricultural production and other economic activities. The lack of a reliable and sustainable labor force weakened the empire's economy. In addition to these internal economic problems, the Roman Empire also faced external pressures. The empire was constantly at war, and the costs of maintaining a large standing army were immense. The Roman military was spread thin across the empire's vast borders, defending against invasions from barbarian tribes. As military expenses increased, the empire's resources were stretched to their limits. This not only drained the economy but also diverted attention and resources away from other vital areas. The decline of trade also played a role in Rome's economic collapse. As the empire became more unstable and fragmented, trade routes were disrupted. The once thriving trade network that had connected the empire's provinces began to break down, leading to shortages of goods and raw materials. Cities that had once been centers of commerce and industry began to decline, and the Roman economy became increasingly isolated. By the time of the empire's collapse, the Roman economy was in a state of disarray. The combination of inflation, heavy taxation, reliance on slave labor, military expenses, and disrupted trade left the empire unable to recover. The economic crisis exacerbated other problems, including political instability, military defeats, and invasions by barbarian tribes. The failure to address these economic challenges ultimately contributed to the downfall of one of history's greatest civilizations. The military was at the heart of the Roman Empire's success, but as the empire grew larger and its borders expanded, the military faced increasing challenges. The Roman legions were once the most powerful fighting force in the ancient world, renowned for their discipline, organization, and effectiveness. However, by the later years of the empire, the military began to show signs of strain. The Romans were forced to contend with a variety of threats, both from within the empire and from outside forces. One of the most significant challenges faced by the Roman military was the sheer size of the empire's borders. At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched from the British Isles in the northwest to the deserts of Egypt in the southeast, and from the Atlantic coast of Spain to the Euphrates River in the east. This vast expanse created a logistical nightmare for the Roman military. Defending such a large area required a massive army, and maintaining a constant military presence along the empire's borders was another problem the Roman military faced was the increasing reliance on mercenaries. As the empire grew and the Roman citizen-soldier model broke down, the Romans began to rely more heavily on foreign soldiers to fill their ranks. These mercenaries were often less loyal than Roman citizens, and many of them had little personal investment in the empire's survival. This made them more susceptible to bribery and influence from outside powers. In some cases, barbarian mercenaries were even used to defend Roman territories, which the Roman military also had to deal with the increasing threat from barbarian invasions. The empire's borders were under constant pressure from tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, and Huns. These groups had been pushed westward by various factors, including the migration of the Huns and the collapse of other empires. They were often seen as barbarians by the Romans, but many of these tribes had their own sophisticated cultures and military tactics. Over time, the barbarians began to overrun the Roman defense. In the 4th and 5th centuries CE, several barbarian groups managed to penetrate the Roman Empire. The Visigoths famously sacked Rome in 410 CE, while the Vandals looted the city again in 455 CE. The Huns, under the leadership of Attila, also posed a significant threat to the empire, although they never managed to conquer Rome itself. Despite these invasions, the Romans were able to muster some resistance, but the repeated attacks weakened the empire's military capabilities. By the time the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 CE, the Roman military was a shadow of its former self. The once feared legions had been stretched too thin, and the empire could no longer effectively defend its borders. The Roman military was also plagued by corruption and internal strife. Generals and officers fought for power, and military discipline deteriorated. The inability to defend the empire's borders and maintain the strength of its military played a key role in the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. In conclusion, the military challenges faced by the Roman Empire were a major factor in its decline. The strain of defending such a vast empire, coupled with the increasing reliance on mercenaries and the threat of barbarian invasions, eventually wore down the Roman military. This left the empire vulnerable to attack, and when combined with the political and economic issues, it contributed to the empire's ultimate collapse. One of the most critical factors in the fall of the Roman Empire was the constant threat posed by barbarian invasions. The term barbarian was used by the Romans to describe the many different tribes and peoples living outside the borders of the empire, such as the Germanic tribes, the Huns, and the Vandals. These groups had long been in contact with Rome, but by the 4th and 5th centuries CE, they became a significant threat to the empire's stability. The decline of the Roman military, as well as the increasing internal strife and economic instability, made it more difficult for Rome to defend its vast borders. The empire's once great legions, which had once been the pride of Rome, were now stretched thin, and the ability to protect the empire's frontiers was severely weakened. As a result, various barbarian tribes began to push into Roman territory, seeking to take advantage of the empire's weakened state. The Visigoths, led by King Alaric, were one of the first barbarian groups to breach the walls of Rome itself. In 410 CE, the Visigoths sacked the city, an event that sent shockwaves throughout the Roman world. This was the first time in over 800 years that the city of Rome had fallen to a foreign enemy, and it marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. While the Visigoths did not destroy Rome completely, the sack of the city was a significant blow to the empire's prestige and morale. The Vandals, another barbarian group, followed in the wake of the Visigoths. In 455 CE, the Vandals, led by King Genseric, raided and looted the city of Rome again. While the Vandals were not as destructive as the Visigoths, their pillaging further eroded the empire's power and reputation. These invasions, combined with the weakening of the Roman military, created a sense of vulnerability within the empire. Perhaps the most infamous barbarian group to invade the Roman Empire were the Huns, led by the fearsome Attila. The Huns were a nomadic people from Central Asia, and under Attila's leadership, they launched a series of devastating raids into the Eastern Roman Empire. While the Huns never captured Rome, their invasions put tremendous pressure on the empire, forcing it to divert resources away from other fronts to deal with the Hunnic threat. The barbarian invasions were not just a result of external pressure, they were also a consequence of internal instability within the Roman Empire. As the empire became increasingly divided, it was harder for the Romans to present a unified front against the barbarians. The Romans often relied on barbarian mercenaries to defend their borders, but these mercenaries, who were often of different ethnic backgrounds, had little loyalty to the Roman state and sometimes switched allegiances or even turned against. In the final years of the Western Roman Empire, the barbarian invasions became more frequent and more destructive. In 476 CE, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. This event is often seen as the official end of the Western Roman Empire. The barbarians had finally succeeded in toppling the last vestiges of Roman power in the West, marking the conclusion of an era that had lasted for more than 1,000 years. In conclusion, the barbarian invasions played a crucial role in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The inability of the Romans to defend their borders, combined with internal divisions and a weakened military, allowed these barbarian groups to push into Roman territory and eventually bring about the collapse of the empire. The division of the Roman Empire is often seen as one of the pivotal moments in the history of the empire. It marked a shift in the way the empire was governed, and in many ways, it laid the foundation for the eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire. The empire had grown too large to be effectively governed by a single ruler, and the division was an attempt to make the administration of the vast territory more manageable. The division of the Roman Empire occurred in 285 CE under the reign of Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian realized that the empire was simply too large to be ruled by one person, especially as external threats were increasing and internal problems were mounting. In response, he divided the empire into two parts: the Western Roman Empire, which was centered in Rome, and the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Diocletian's division was not a permanent split, rather, it was a temporary solution that allowed for more efficient governance. He appointed a co-emperor to rule the eastern part of the empire while he ruled the western half. This system, known as the Tetrarchy, was meant to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of one ruler and to ensure that the empire could respond more quickly to military threats. However, the Tetrarchy did not last long. After Diocletian's abdication in 305 CE, the empire fell into a period of civil war, with various factions vying for control. The struggle for power between these factions weakened the empire and made it more vulnerable to external threats. Eventually, Constantine the Great emerged as the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, and he reunified the empire under his rule in 324 CE. Although Constantine succeeded in reuniting the empire, the damage had already been done. The division had created two distinct administrative and cultural centers. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, was far more economically stable and militarily capable than the Western Roman Empire, which was plagued by economic instability, military decline, and political corruption. In the centuries that followed, the two halves of the empire grew further apart. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for several more centuries while the Western Roman Empire faced increasing internal strife and external invasions. The division of the empire, therefore, set the stage for the eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE, while the Eastern Roman Empire survived until 1453 CE. The division of the Roman Empire also had lasting cultural and religious consequences. The Eastern Roman Empire became a center of Orthodox Christianity, while the Western Roman Empire was heavily influenced by Latin-speaking Christianity. This division played a significant role in the development of Christian theology and the eventual schism between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. In conclusion, the division of the Roman Empire was a crucial turning point in its history. While it was intended as a solution to the empire's administrative challenges, it ultimately contributed to the empire's fragmentation. The split created two distinct empires, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, and the Western Roman Empire, weakened by internal divisions and external invasions, ultimately fell, while the Eastern Roman Empire endured for nearly 8,000 years after the fall of Rome. One of the key factors contributing to the fall of the Roman Empire was the widespread corruption and betrayal within its government. As the empire expanded, the challenges of managing such a vast and diverse territory became more complex. Unfortunately, the Roman political system, which had once been built on principles of public service and civic duty, began to erode as corruption took hold at all levels of government. The Roman political system had been designed to include checks and balances, with a senate and elected officials who were meant to represent the interests of the people. However, over time, political power became concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy elites who manipulated the system for their own benefit. This shift toward oligarchy and the concentration of wealth and power led to the alienation of the lower classes and undermined the principles of Roman republicanism. One of the most significant sources of corruption within the Roman government was the widespread practice of bribery. As the empire grew, the competition for political office became fierce. Ambitious individuals sought power through any means, including the use of bribes and manipulation. Elections were often rigged, and politicians used their influence to secure lucrative positions for themselves and their families. This culture of corruption infiltrated every level of government, from local magistrates to the highest offices in Rome. In addition to bribery, betrayal was another significant problem within the Roman government. As the empire grew more unstable, political alliances became increasingly fragile. It was not uncommon for politicians and military leaders to betray one another in order to secure their own position or advance their personal interests. This constant infighting and backstabbing weakened the Roman political system and made it more difficult for the empire to function effectively. The deterioration of the Roman political system was also exacerbated by the rise of military leaders who sought to gain power through force. As the empire faced increasing threats from external enemies, many military commanders saw an opportunity to seize control. Generals like Julius Caesar, who famously crossed the Rubicon and marched on Rome in 49 BCE, were able to use their armies to gain political power. While Caesar's rise marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of imperial rule, it also highlighted the dangerous consequences of the militarization of politics. The corruption and betrayal within the Roman government also led to a weakening of the empire's ability to respond to external threats. As political leaders fought among themselves, they were less able to focus on defending the empire's borders or addressing the growing economic and military challenges. This lack of effective leadership further destabilized the empire and made it more vulnerable to invasions from barbarian tribes and other external forces. In the later years of the empire, the political situation became even more dire. Emperors were often overthrown or assassinated by their own officials or military commanders. The most infamous example of this was the assassination of Emperor Caligula in 41 CE and the subsequent rise of his successor, Claudius. The constant turnover of emperors and the violence associated with these political upheavals created an environment of uncertainty and fear that further undermined the empire's stability. In conclusion, corruption and betrayal within the Roman government were critical factors in the empire's decline. The concentration of power in the hands of a few elites, the rise of political corruption, and the constant infighting and backstabbing weakened the Roman political system and made it increasingly difficult to govern such a vast empire. The lack of effective leadership and the betrayal of public trust played a significant role in the fall of the Roman Empire, as the government was unable to provide the stability and the role of Christianity in the fall of the Roman Empire is a topic that has been widely debated by historians. While Christianity itself was not the direct cause of the empire's decline, its rise to prominence played a significant role in the transformation of Roman society and politics. Christianity, which began as a small religious movement in the eastern part of the empire, gradually spread throughout the Roman world and became a powerful force that challenged many of the traditional Roman verses. Christianity's rise coincided with a period of great change within the Roman Empire. During the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the empire faced numerous challenges, including economic decline, military crises, and political instability. As Roman society grappled with these difficulties, Christianity offered an alternative vision of the world, one that focused on spiritual salvation rather than earthly power. This new religious outlook began to attract a growing number of followers, particularly among the Emperor Constantine the Great played a pivotal role in the rise of Christianity. In 313 CE, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious tolerance to all faiths within the empire, effectively legalizing Christianity. This was a major turning point for the Christian religion, as it allowed Christians to practice their faith openly without fear of persecution. Constantine himself converted to Christianity and became its most prominent supporter, using his imperial power to promote the. As Christianity gained influence, it began to reshape Roman society. One of the most significant changes was the decline of traditional Roman religious practices. The Roman pantheon, which had been an integral part of Roman culture and identity for centuries, was gradually replaced by the Christian faith. Many of the temples and shrines dedicated to the Roman gods were either abandoned or repurposed for Christian use. This shift in religious practice caused a cultural and ideological rift within Romans. The rise of Christianity also had a profound impact on the Roman political system. The Christian Church gradually became more involved in the governance of the empire. Christian bishops and leaders began to wield significant influence over political decisions, and the Church itself became a powerful institution. This shift in power from the traditional Roman political structures to the Christian Church is seen by some historians as one of the factors that weakened the empire's ability to effectively. Moreover, the spread of Christianity also led to internal divisions within the Roman Empire. The Christian faith was not monolithic, and disputes over theological issues, such as the nature of Christ, led to a series of religious controversies and schisms. These theological debates often spilled over into the political sphere, as emperors and bishops alike took sides in the arguments. The resulting conflicts weakened the unity of the empire, as the Christian Church became more entrenched in the empires. Despite these internal divisions, Christianity ultimately became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. In 380 CE, Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica, which made Christianity the official state religion of the empire. This marked the final victory of Christianity over paganism in the Roman world. However, this shift also contributed to the decline of Roman traditional culture, as many of the old customs and practices were replaced by Christian values. In conclusion, the rise of Christianity played an important role in the transformation of the Roman Empire. While it did not directly cause the empire's fall, it contributed to a shift in the cultural, political, and religious landscape of Rome. The decline of traditional Roman religious practices, the increasing influence of the Christian Church in political affairs, and the ideological divisions caused by theological disputes all played a part in the weakening of the empire. Ultimately, the decline of the Roman Empire was not just a political or military failure, but also a cultural one. Over time, the empire's once great cultural achievements began to fade as internal strife, economic instability, and foreign invasions took their toll. The cultural decline of Rome was evident in several key areas, including art, literature, education, and public life. During the height of the Roman Empire, Roman culture flourished. The Romans were known for their achievements in architecture, engineering, law, and the arts. They built magnificent structures such as the Colosseum and the aqueducts, which were marvels of engineering. Roman literature, with works by authors like Virgil and Ovid, was influential and enduring. Roman law provided a framework for governance that influenced legal systems for centuries. The Romans also developed a highly organized public life, with civic institutions such as the Senate and a complex system of roads, infrastructure, and public baths. However, as the empire faced increasing challenges, the cultural achievements of Rome began to decline. One of the most significant reasons for this was the constant warfare that drained the empire's resources and attention. The Roman military, once the envy of the world, was now stretched thin, and the empire's economic resources were depleted by the need to support the army. This left less funding available for public works, education, and cultural endeavors. At the same time, the Roman elite, who had once been patrons of the arts and culture, became more focused on personal wealth and power. The growing concentration of wealth in the hands of a few individuals, along with widespread corruption, meant that fewer resources were available to support cultural activities. Many of the great institutions of Roman society, including the Senate, had become corrupt and ineffective. The Roman political system, which had once been a model of governance, was now riddled with factionalism and instability. The decline in education was also a major factor in the cultural decline of Rome. In the earlier days of the empire, education was highly valued, and wealthy Roman families would send their children to be educated by private tutors or in public schools. However, as the empire weakened, education became less of a priority. With the decline of public order and the growing instability of Roman society, many wealthy families withdrew from public life and ceased to invest in education. The traditional Roman emphasis on civic virtue and public service, which had once been central to Roman culture, gave way to a more self-serving, individualistic mindset. The decline in public life was also reflected in the decay of the once vibrant Roman cities. Once thriving urban centers, where public life was bustling with markets, theaters, and civic events, began to suffer from neglect. The economy of the Western Roman Empire deteriorated, leading to a decrease in trade and a rise in rural self-sufficiency. Cities, once centers of culture and activity, became less important, and many were abandoned as people retreated to the countryside. The cultural decline of Rome was also influenced by the rise of Christianity. While Christianity itself was not inherently opposed to Roman culture, it did bring about significant changes in the way people viewed the world. The Christian emphasis on the afterlife and the rejection of materialism contrasted sharply with the Roman emphasis on worldly power and achievement. As Christianity became more dominant, Roman cultural traditions were slowly replaced by Christian values, further contributing to the erosion of Roman culture. In conclusion, the cultural decline of the Roman Empire was a gradual process that was influenced by a number of factors, including warfare, economic instability, political corruption, and the rise of Christianity. As the empire weakened, the once great cultural achievements of Rome began to fade, and the values that had once defined Roman society were replaced by new ones. This cultural decline, alongside political and military challenges, played a significant role in the eventual collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The siege and sack of Rome in 410 CE was a defining moment in the history of the Roman Empire. For over 800 years, Rome had been the center of the empire, the symbol of Roman power and civilization. The idea of Rome being invaded and its people being defeated was unthinkable to many, but the events of 410 CE shattered this illusion and marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. The Visigoths, a Germanic tribe led by King Alaric, were responsible for the sack of Rome. The Visigoths had been pressing against the borders of the Roman Empire for years, seeking to find a place for themselves within the empire's territories. They had initially been allowed to settle within Roman borders as foederati, or allies, but as the Romans failed to meet their demands and treat them fairly, tensions between the Visigoths and the Roman Empire escalated. In 408 CE, the Visigoths, after years of negotiation and conflict, laid siege to Rome. The Roman Emperor, Honorius, was unable to mount an effective defense, and the city of Rome was effectively cut off. The Visigoths surrounded the city, blocking all supplies and reinforcements. The Romans were unable to resist the siege, and the population began to suffer from starvation and disease. The siege of Rome lasted for several months, and despite various attempts by the Roman Senate to negotiate with Alaric, the Visigoth king refused to lift the siege unless he was given money, land, and other concessions. In 410 CE, after the Romans failed to meet his demands, Alaric ordered his forces to breach the walls of the city. The Visigoths entered Rome, and what followed was a shocking and violent sack of the city. The sack of Rome was not as destructive as the earlier plundering of Carthage or the later sackings of Constantinople, but it was a brutal event nonetheless. The Visigoths looted the city, taking precious items, art, and religious treasures. Roman citizens were killed, enslaved, or driven out of their homes. Many of the city's most sacred places, including the temples of Roman gods, were desecrated. The city that had once been the center of the world was now a shadow of its former self. For many Romans, the sack of Rome was a deeply traumatic event. The idea that Rome could be sacked by a foreign enemy was a profound blow to the Roman psyche. The city had stood for centuries as a symbol of power and civilization, and now it was vulnerable to the whims of a barbarian king. For many, it was a wake-up call, a sign that the empire was no longer invincible and that its days were numbered. The sack of Rome in 410 CE was a turning point in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. While the empire would continue to exist for another 66 years, the events of 410 CE showed that the empire was in a state of irreversible decline. The Visigoths, though temporarily halted, were a reminder that the Roman Empire could no longer defend itself against external threats. The political instability, economic decline, and weakening military were all contributing factors to the empire's eventual collapse. The sack of Rome, however, was not the final blow to the empire. The Visigoths eventually left the city, but their actions set in motion a series of events that would lead to the fragmentation and eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire. The sack of Rome was a symbol of the empire's inability to defend its core, and it marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the Mediterranean world. The empire would never fully recover from this event, and the Visigoths would go on to establish their own kingdom in conclusion, the sack of Rome in 410 CE was a pivotal moment in Roman history. It symbolized the decline of the Western Roman Empire and the vulnerability of the once great city. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, exposed the weakness of the Roman Empire, and their actions had far-reaching consequences for the empire's future. While Rome would continue to exist for several more decades, the events of 410 CE demonstrated that the Roman world was irrevocably changed. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE is one of the most significant events in world history. It marked the end of centuries of Roman rule in the West and the beginning of the Middle Ages in Europe. However, the fall of the Western Roman Empire was not a single event, but rather the culmination of a series of political, military, economic, and social factors that weakened the empire over time. One of the key factors in the fall of the Western Roman Empire was the constant pressure from barbarian invasions. Throughout the 4th and 5th centuries CE, the empire faced repeated invasions from various barbarian groups, including the Visigoths, Vandals, Huns, and Franks. These groups, often displaced by other migrating tribes or driven by economic pressures, pushed into Roman territory, exploiting the empire's weakened defenses. The Romans were unable to mount an effective defense, and many of these invaders found success. In 476 CE, the final blow to the Western Roman Empire came when the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. Odoacer, a former mercenary in the Roman army, had led a rebellion against the Roman emperor and declared himself the ruler of Italy. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus marked the official end of the Western Roman Empire. However, it is important to note that the fall of Rome had been a gradual process, and Odoacer's rise to power was the culmination. Another important factor in the fall of the Western Roman Empire was internal political instability. The empire had been plagued by corruption, weak leadership, and infighting among the ruling class for centuries. As the empire expanded, it became more difficult to manage the vast territories and diverse peoples under Roman control. Political power became concentrated in the hands of a few elite families, and the central government became increasingly ineffective. This internal weakness made it difficult for the empire to effectively deal with outside threats. Economic decline was also a significant factor in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The empire's economy, once the most advanced in the world, began to deteriorate as a result of high taxes, inflation, and a lack of innovation. The reliance on slave labor stifled technological advancement, and the empire's trade networks, which had once stretched across the Mediterranean and beyond, began to collapse. The economic decline made it harder for the empire to fund its military and administrative apparatus. The rise of Christianity also played a role in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. As Christianity spread throughout the empire, it began to challenge the traditional Roman values and institutions that had supported Roman rule. The Christian Church grew in power, and its influence over political and social matters increased. Some historians argue that the rise of Christianity contributed to the decline of the empire by eroding traditional Roman values, such as loyalty to the state and the worship of Roman gods. The combination of these factors, barbarian invasions, political instability, economic decline, and the rise of Christianity, contributed to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. While the empire's eastern half, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for several more centuries, the fall of the Western Roman Empire marked a major turning point in European history. It signified the end of the ancient world and the beginning of a new era, one that would be shaped by the influence of the barbarian invaders. In conclusion, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE was the result of a complex combination of internal and external factors. The empire's political, military, and economic systems had become increasingly ineffective, and external pressures, particularly from barbarian invasions, proved to be the final catalyst for its collapse. The fall of the Western Roman Empire ushered in a new era in European history, one that would be shaped by new political and religious forces. The legacy of the Roman Empire is profound and far-reaching. Even though the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, its influence continued to shape the course of history for centuries to come. The cultural, political, legal, and architectural achievements of Rome left an indelible mark on the world, influencing the development of Western civilization and many aspects of modern life. One of the most enduring aspects of the Roman legacy is its legal system. Roman law, particularly the development of the concept of natural law and the codification of legal principles, has had a lasting influence on legal systems in many parts of the world. The Roman legal framework, especially as articulated in works such as the Corpus Juris Civilis under Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, provided the foundation for many modern legal systems. Concepts such as the rights of individuals, property laws, and the right to a fair trial can trace their origins back to Roman law. Roman architecture and engineering also left an indelible mark. The Romans were masters of construction, and their engineering feats were unrivaled in the ancient world. They built aqueducts to supply water to cities, constructed durable roads that connected their vast empire, and created impressive buildings such as the Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the Roman Forum. Many of these structures still stand today as symbols of Roman engineering ingenuity. The Romans also pioneered the use of concrete, which revolutionized construction techniques and allowed them to build structures that were more durable and long-lasting than anything before. The Roman concept of citizenship and governance was another significant part of their legacy. While the Roman Republic had a complex system of elected officials and a senate, the Roman Empire was governed by an emperor who wielded supreme power. However, the idea of citizenship, with its associated rights and responsibilities, was an important Roman contribution to governance. Roman citizenship granted individuals certain legal protections, and it became a model for later political systems, including those in medieval Europe and, eventually, modern democracies. Roman culture and language also had a lasting impact. Latin, the language of the Romans, became the lingua franca of Europe for many centuries. The Romance languages, including Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian, are direct descendants of Latin. In addition, Roman literature, philosophy, and art influenced later intellectual traditions in the West. Writers such as Virgil, Cicero, and Seneca set the stage for the development of Western literature, and the study of Roman history, philosophy, and rhetoric remained central to education for centuries. The fall of the Western Roman Empire did not mean the end of the Roman legacy. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for nearly 8,000 years after the fall of the West. The Byzantine Empire preserved and continued many aspects of Roman culture and law, including the Latin language, Roman governance, and Roman architectural traditions. The Byzantine Empire also served as a bridge between the ancient world and the medieval period, preserving classical knowledge that was later rediscovered during the Renaissance. Furthermore, the rise of the Holy Roman Empire in the early Middle Ages sought to revive the political and cultural ideals of Rome. The idea of the Roman Empire continued to inspire political leaders and thinkers throughout the medieval period and into the Renaissance. Charlemagne, for example, sought to revive the idea of Roman imperial authority when he was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 CE. The symbolism of the Roman Empire, its grandeur and achievements, remained a powerful influence on European rulers for centuries. In conclusion, the legacy of the Roman Empire is one of the most enduring in world history. Its legal, architectural, cultural, and political contributions continue to shape modern societies. The idea of Rome, both as a political entity and as a symbol of civilization, remained a central reference point throughout history, influencing everything from modern legal systems to the cultural and intellectual traditions of the West. The fall of Rome may have marked the end of the Western Roman Empire, but its influence was far from over. The role of trade in the economy in the decline of the Roman Empire is a crucial aspect to understand when studying the empire's collapse. Throughout its history, the Roman Empire relied heavily on trade and a thriving economy to maintain its vast military, support its citizens, and fuel its many ambitious construction projects. However, as the empire expanded and faced external and internal pressures, the economy began to weaken, contributing to the overall decline of Roman power. Roman trade networks were extensive, stretching across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Roman Empire controlled some of the most important trade routes of the ancient world, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and ideas. Roman merchants traded in a wide variety of goods, including grain, wine, oil, pottery, glassware, and luxury items such as silk, spices, and precious metals. These goods were exchanged both within the empire and with foreign lands, including India and China. The Roman economy was also largely based on agriculture, with large estates worked by slaves and free labor. The Roman agricultural system was highly efficient and productive, providing the empire with the resources it needed to sustain its population and military. However, as the empire expanded and the population grew, the demand for food and other resources became more difficult to meet. Additionally, the reliance on slave labor created long-term economic problems, as it stifled technological innovation and the decline of the Roman economy can also be attributed to the empire's increasing reliance on military conquest to fund its operations. For much of its history, the Roman Empire financed its military campaigns by plundering the wealth of conquered territories and through tribute payments from client states. However, by the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the empire had reached the limits of its expansion, and the influx of new wealth from conquest slowed dramatically. As a result, the empire began to. Inflation became a major problem in the later years of the Roman Empire. To finance its military and administrative costs, the Roman government began to debase its currency, reducing the amount of precious metal in coins. This led to inflation, as the value of the currency decreased and prices rose. The economic instability caused by inflation made it even more difficult for the empire to maintain its military and infrastructure, further weakening the Roman state. Another significant issue facing the Roman economy was the disruption of trade routes. The empire's vast trade networks were vulnerable to attacks from barbarian groups, and during the later years of the empire, many of these trade routes were disrupted or closed off. The invasions of the Huns and Germanic tribes in the 4th and 5th centuries CE put immense pressure on the Roman economy, as they attacked cities, looted goods, and destroyed infrastructure. This severely impacted the empire's ability to company. The weakening of the Roman economy had far-reaching effects on Roman society. As the economy deteriorated, the empire became increasingly dependent on local resources and self-sufficiency. This led to a decline in the urbanization of the empire, as cities became less important and people moved to the countryside. The collapse of the economy also contributed to the decline of the Roman military, as soldiers were no longer paid adequately and the empire struggled to maintain its once elite fighting force. In conclusion, the role of trade in the economy in the decline of the Roman Empire was significant. The empire's reliance on trade and economic expansion was crucial to its strength, but as the economy weakened and trade routes were disrupted, the empire began to crumble. The reliance on military conquest, inflation, and the disruption of trade played major roles in the empire's eventual collapse. The weakening of the Roman economy was one of the key factors that led to the fall of the empire and the eventual rise of. The role of the military in the fall of the Roman Empire is a critical factor that often gets overlooked when examining the empire's decline. The Roman military was once the most powerful fighting force in the ancient world, and its strength was central to the empire's ability to expand, defend its borders, and maintain control over its vast territories. However, by the 4th and 5th centuries CE, the Roman military had become weakened by internal divisions, lack of discipline, and the increasing pressure of external threats. One of the major problems facing the Roman military was the increasing reliance on mercenaries. During the later years of the empire, the Roman army became less reliant on its own citizens and more dependent on foreign mercenaries to fill its ranks. These mercenaries, often from barbarian tribes, were less loyal to the Roman state and more interested in personal gain. The use of mercenaries undermined the cohesion and discipline of the Roman military, as many soldiers had little loyalty to the empire and were more likely to switch allegiances to the highest bidder. The decline in military discipline was another major factor that contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. Roman soldiers, once known for their rigorous training and unwavering loyalty, became less effective as the empire's political and economic situation deteriorated. As the Roman military relied more on mercenaries and less on trained Roman citizens, the discipline of the army weakened. The soldiers became less focused on defending the empire and more concerned with personal enrichment, leading to a decline in their combat effectiveness. In addition to the decline in discipline, the Roman military faced increasing difficulty in maintaining its vast borders. The empire had grown too large for its military to adequately defend, and the Roman army was spread thin across the empire. The Roman military's inability to defend the empire's frontiers effectively allowed barbarian groups such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns to breach the borders and launch devastating invasions. The military was often too stretched and disorganized to mount an effective defense, leading to the loss of territory and the eventual collapse of the empire. The weakening of the Roman military was also exacerbated by the empire's political instability. As political infighting and corruption plagued the empire, the military became increasingly politicized. Generals and military leaders often used their armies to gain power and influence, undermining the cohesion of the Roman military. Civil wars between rival military commanders weakened the army further and diverted resources away from defending the empire's borders. Another key factor in the decline of the Roman military was the shift in the empire's military strategy. During its peak, the Roman military relied on a highly structured system of legions, each with its own distinct role in battle. However, as the empire weakened, this system began to break down. The Roman military's reliance on large-scale, organized armies became less effective as smaller, more mobile barbarian groups used unconventional tactics to attack the empire. The Roman army was slow to adapt to these new tactics and was often caught off guard by the barbarian invasions. The collapse of the Roman military also had a profound impact on the empire's social and economic structures. As the military became less effective, the empire's ability to defend its territories and maintain order within its borders deteriorated. The loss of control over key trade routes and agricultural lands severely weakened the empire's economy. The lack of security also led to a breakdown in social order, with widespread corruption, banditry, and lawlessness becoming more common. In conclusion, the role of the military in the fall of the Roman Empire was a significant and multifaceted issue. The decline in military discipline, the reliance on mercenaries, the inability to defend the empire's borders, and the increasing political instability within the military all contributed to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The weakening of the military, once the backbone of Roman power, ultimately played a critical role in the fall of one of history's greatest empires.